The backhand can be one of the scariest and trickiest shots that we have in the game. Most people actually tend to run around their backhand to hit their forehand just because of that reason. In today's video, we're going to be going over the ins and outs of what you can do to emphasize or avoid little pitfalls when it comes to hitting your backhand, and specifically what we can do to really gain some confidence on that side of our stroke. Welcome to today's Tennis 101, where we're going over the two-handed backhand. So before we get started, I'm going to shamelessly plug this video I did a couple of weeks ago because it's the most important video of this series. When you start working on your two-handed backhand, it is imperative that you choose the proper grip for you and the proper grip for the way you want to play. I did a video a couple of weeks ago where I go over all the ins and outs of the grips for your forehand, your backhand, your one-handed backhand, and even your serve. So check out that video before you do the things that we're going to work on in this video. If you already know what grips you're going to be using, we can get started. So the key factor we're going to be looking at when we work on the backhand is where our power is coming from. Now, universally, we want to make sure that our legs are under us for all of our shots, but the two-handed backhand versus the one-handed backhand are unique because our power sources are going to be in different locations. Just for comparison, when you're hitting a one-handed backhand, your power source or your power shoulder is in front of you and you're going to be pulling your stroke out. But with the two-handed backhand, your power source is actually located behind you and it's in your non-dominant hand, in which case you're going to be pushing your stroke out. Both hands will be on, but what gets most people in trouble in the very beginning is still using their dominant arm to control what's going on with the backhand. What I recommend doing is actually practicing with your non-dominant hand for about 2 or 3 minutes, just to get the concept of finding pressure with the palm of the backhand. And when I say backhand, meaning the non-dominant hand, finding pressure at contact with your non-dominant hand and then hitting through, and then taking your lead hand and just bringing it along for a ride. Most times I actually have people practice using just 2 fingers so they're not really trying to muscle the opposite hand, and let the back hand or the non-dominant hand push through the stroke. Regardless of what shot you're practicing, getting your racket to go out through there. So the first thing we're going to look at when we actually get into getting ready for the shot is going to be our preparation. Now, there's 2 main ways to prepare your racket. You can prepare your racket with the tip up. You can prepare your racket with the tip down. Both of those are acceptable, but they're going to create different types of shapes on your swing. People who tend to prepare with the racket tip up are going to tend to have slightly more loopy motions because gravity is going to make the racket fall down through the stroke as they're swinging. Whereas people who prepare with the racket tip down have a tendency to hit a little bit more linear through the stroke. Either is fine. You can create spin with a pointing down motion, and you can hit a flat backhand with the tip up, but the natural affinity for those shots is always going to be this one's going to fall a little more and this one's going to travel a little bit straighter. Now, as I've said in other videos, the thing you want to pay the most attention to when preparing is that you open up your hip when you go to set the racket. So if I'm facing the camera now, as I set my racket, regardless of which angle I go to, that hip is going to open, which is going to allow me to run that way. And it's also going to allow me to brace my body weight naturally if I only have to take 1 step, which then I can execute the stroke. After that, all your movement and reception skills are going to be based on your interpretation of what's going on with the ball. But at that point, the racket should still be moving in this position. We don't want to get in the habit of moving the racket around too much, or what I call double setting, where we'll set the racket halfway, then get close to the ball, and then set the racket the rest of the way. We want to get in the habit of getting this racket all the way into those positions, get those shoulders turned, and get those hips open from the very beginning of the setup. The next part we're going to look at is swing path, and this is very similar to what I did in the video when we talked about the forehand. You're going to have to decide what type of shot you're trying to hit, and then what's going to happen is the swing path is going to tilt at certain angles depending on what you want to do. So basically, rehashing the lesson I did last time, once we get our racket into our set position, we're going to have a universal contact point that we're trying to find. I'm going to use that dot again right here. And then we're going to have that universal contact point, which is what this dot represents. Now, if I want to hit a flat stroke from this preparation, I'm going to line my racket up with that dot, and I'm going to swing straight to that dot, and then I'm going to extend beyond it, which is going to create a linear path of the shot. If I want to create a little bit more lift, I'm going to drop below that line and then come up to that same spot and then extend beyond that line, which is going to create more angle. And if I want to do an extreme version of it, I would drop the racket even more, come up to that same spot, and then extend even higher. That's going to create, again, more lift, more spin, more height. And those are going to be the things that adjust depending on what your outcome is that you're desiring on the other side of the net. For example, if you're trying to be a little bit more aggressive, you're going to be looking at that linear swing path. If you're trying to be a little bit more defensive or neutral, you're going to be looking at the ones that you have to lift up a little more. Now, depending on which one you want to do, that's going to determine what you do with your legs after. So for example, if I'm hitting neutral or defensive, you might see me stopping in that open stance to do those swings. And if I'm hitting a little bit more aggressive, you might find me shifting my weight from my outside foot to my front foot, which is going to allow me to carry that momentum through the more linear swing path. Now, I emphasize this all the time, but contact point is not the goal. It's in the middle of the goal. We're trying to get to this ideal contact point and contact height, but a lot of people get themselves in trouble of going right to that spot without really caring about what happens after. And you'll see these weird little adjustments in the swing because of it. So picking your swing path and having your contact point in the middle of your swing path is what's going to affect the ball consistently on the other side, rather than just playing chase the ball and trying to figure out how to maneuver the racket once you get there. So pick these shots, and these shots are labeled as flat, rally, and heavy, and those are going to be the shots that you're going to be trying to decide on what situation requires which shot. Now the last thing we're going to do is cover the finish, which is a natural part of the swing. Do not artificially have any finishes in your stroke. What that means is if you're swinging this slow, it makes no sense for you to all of a sudden bring your racket all the way up to here. The finish is a natural deceleration tool. It's something meant to avoid injury because your body shouldn't be stiffening up and breaking these really fast swings by just going all the way out and stopping. So as a result, we have a finish that happens on the opposite side of our body, which allows the muscles, tendons, and joints to kind of relax naturally. Now, depending on which one of those swing paths that you chose, your finish is going to be different. But your finish should be natural. If I'm swinging heavy, which is really low to really high, my finish is going to continue beyond that ball and still end up over my shoulder, but it's going to be up and then to my shoulder. Whereas if I hit flat, I'm going to be finishing more into my shot and then still ending up in this position. Don't get in the habit of forcing yourself to get to your shoulder. If the shot doesn't require it or you're not swinging that fast, the natural deceleration should just end wherever it ends. Sometimes you'll see people hit backhands where their shot just kind of stops right there and then they reset. And if they're really ripping into it, you're going to see them getting all the way into this position. So just be aware of not forcing the finish. If your contact point is here and you're extending up, then you're probably going to end up coming to your shoulder pretty naturally. Whereas if your contact point is here and you're extending forward and you're not really hitting super hard, you might end up just kind of chilling back into this position. A lot of coaches have the bad habit of telling people finish over your shoulder, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not something that's as important as people tell each other. So that's going to wrap up today's video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If you know anybody would benefit from this stuff, please send it off to them. Remember, the backhand is not to be avoided, it's to be trained. Your backhand's not going to get better by running around backhands and hitting more forehands. Don't be afraid to get on court and drill it a little bit, but just use these key points that we talked about. Remember, we've got preparation and we've got the focusing on the non-dominant hand actually pushing through the shot, what swing path we're working on, and letting the racket finish naturally. Don't overdo those things. Don't try to manufacture them. Just let them happen on their own and just feel the individual pieces kind of start to groove together. If you know anybody who benefit from this stuff, as I said, please send it off to them. Thank you for tuning in to today's Tennis 101. I'll see you guys in the next one.